This video is about moving files between Alias and Blender. I'm going to start in Blender, and to prepare your model there are 5 things to consider. First one is non-manifold geometry. Now if I turn off the mirror modifier off here, and if we go into edit mode and make sure we're in edge mode here, and we go to select all by trait non-manifold, you can have non-manifold geometry like this as long as it's the perimeter of an object. If, for example, I had something like this and I went to select all by trait non-manifold, it selects these edges as non-manifold, and these edges are what would break the model and it wouldn't work. So let's delete that again. So that's the first thing to consider. Let's turn that back on. The second thing to consider is your modifiers, and in particular your subdivision modifier. Now by default, when you import models into Alias, it adds a subdivision modifier to it by default, and it's hardwired and you can't turn it off. So if you don't have a subdivision modifier, put one on and see how your model will look. So for example, this is what the model looks like without any modifiers on it. So if I was to import this straight into Alias, it would apply a subdivision modifier, so it would look like this, which in this case is not what we want. What we do want is both of these on as well. The third thing to consider is your normals. To check your normals, go up here to your overlays and face orientation, and you want all the outsides to be blue. So for example, this wouldn't work. So if you had something like this, you'd go to mesh, normals, recalculate outside, and it will fix it. Or if you wanted to do individual faces, select the face, go into mesh, normals, and flip. The fourth thing to consider is creases. Now this particular model doesn't have any creases in it, so this will be good to go to be saved out as an OBJ file. I've got another example here of a model. Now this one does have creases on it, so this would have to be saved out as an FBX file. However, in this particular case, this model is made up of 2 components. So this would have to be broken up into 2 components in order to save out correctly. So you would select an isolated island, press P and separate selection. So now I'd have 2 components, and this would be good to go to be saved out as an FBX. If you save this out as an OBJ, it would ignore the creases and it would look like this in Alias. And that's it, we're ready to export. So let's go back to the version that we're going to save as an OBJ, which is this one. So because it's an OBJ, this can be 2 parts within 1 component and it won't have an issue with it. So let's go File, Export, OBJ. Let's go back into here, make sure that's selected. So selected only is what we'll be exporting. Let's change the scaling to 100, forward axis to Y, apply modifiers. So when you import stuff into Alias, by default, it applies its own subdivision modifier. So if we were to leave this one on, it would apply this one and another one. So we'll turn this one off and we'll keep these on. So yeah, if this icon is turned off, it won't apply it here. The rest of it, you can just turn off. And let's call this FL logo OBJ and go. Okay, and now let's see how we would do something which has creases on it. With creases, each component has to be a single piece. So, for example, this is one component, but it's made up of 2 pieces, so this wouldn't work. So hence, select those, separate, and ready to go. So once each part is a separate piece, you can then select them, go to File, Export, FBX, and then very similar to before, going to keep everything off. We're going to go Scale, 100. Forward is Y. And turn these off. Geometry, apply modifiers as before. Let's turn off subdivision. For simplicity, I've just turned everything off. Let's export FBX. Now in Alias, to import the OBJ, you go to File, Import, Subdiv. You find your OBJ, and that's it. Your model's there. Put that on a new layer. Turn it off. Create a new layer. So to import the FBX, you go to File, Import. This time we go to File, and we click on the little square on the right hand side. And we go to FBX, go to Import, select our file. And there it is. So there's our creases. And that's it. And then to go from Alias to Blender, it's the same thing really. If you have creases, you export as an FBX. If you don't have creases, just go to Export, Export Active as sub D, and that's it. And then back in Blender, turn these off. Import, OBJ, export back to Blender. The only thing here really is you change your scale to 0.001. Forward axis is again Y. And import OBJ. And there is our file. And that is how you move files between Alias and Blender. All right, see you later.